The small human child sat in a strange room aboard the alien ship. Bright lights flickered above him, casting odd shadows on the cold metal floor. He felt a mix of fear and curiosity. The aliens who had taken him were tall and had strange features. Their skin shimmered in different colors, and they spoke in a language he could not understand. They seemed to be studying him closely, but he was not going to let fear take over. As he watched the aliens, he noticed something important. They were using machines to scan him, poking and prodding in ways that made him uncomfortable. They seemed to think he was just a specimen, something to be examined. But deep inside, the child knew he was more than that. He was a human, and humans were smart. The aliens paid little attention to him when they were busy with their machines. This gave the child a chance to look around the room. He focused on the tools and gadgets that the aliens were using. There were buttons, screens, and wires everywhere. With each passing moment, he began to understand more about the technology surrounding him. In the corner of the room, he saw a small screen flashing different images. Curiosity pulled him closer. As he reached out to touch it, a series of strange symbols appeared. The child frowned, realizing he had no idea what they meant. But he didn't let that discourage him. He had always been good at puzzles back on Earth, and this felt like one. He spent hours observing the aliens as they worked. They would press buttons and the machines would beep and whir. Sometimes they would turn to each other, their eyes wide with excitement as if they had discovered something new. The child began to notice patterns in their actions. When they pressed one button, it made a certain sound. Another button would show a picture on the screen. "I can do this," he whispered to himself, feeling a spark of hope. He realized that if he paid close attention, he might be able to learn how to use the machines too. Each day, he grew more confident in his abilities. One day, while the aliens were busy talking, the child decided to explore further. He quietly crept towards a large machine in the center of the room. Its lights blinked in a rhythm that made it look almost alive. He ran his fingers over the smooth surface, feeling the warmth of the machine. He had to understand what it did. As he examined it, he remembered stories he had heard from his parents about great inventors and explorers. They always said that being curious was the first step to being brave. Inspired by those words, he began to press the buttons one by one. At first, nothing happened. The child felt a twinge of disappointment, but quickly brushed it away. He would not give up. With each button pressed, he listened closely to the sounds around him. Then suddenly, the machine let out a loud beep. The child jumped back in surprise, his heart racing. He had done something. Encouraged by the response, he pressed another button, and this time a screen lit up, displaying strange symbols and graphs. What does this mean? He wondered. His mind raced with questions, but he was also filled with excitement. He was learning. Just then, one of the aliens turned and spotted him. Panic surged through the child. He quickly stepped away from the machine, trying to look innocent. The alien approached, its large eyes narrowing as it inspected the child. The child held his breath, waiting for the alien to react. But instead of anger, the alien seemed confused. It turned back to the machine, examining the screen with a look of curiosity. The child realized that he had not only surprised the alien, but also gained a little respect. He smiled to himself, feeling a sense of accomplishment. From that moment on, the child decided to learn everything he could about the alien technology. He watched, listened, and studied whenever the aliens were distracted. He knew that understanding their machines could be the key to his escape. Each new discovery filled him with hope and courage. He was not just a scared child anymore, he was becoming a brave explorer in a world full of wonders. And with each passing day, he grew more determined to find a way back home. The child had been on the alien ship for days, feeling lost and scared. He spent most of his time watching the aliens and learning about their strange machines. But deep down, he felt lonely. He missed his family and friends back on Earth. He wished he could find someone who understood him, someone to share his fears and hopes. One day, while exploring the ship, he stumbled upon a small, dark room. It was different from the others he had seen. This room was quiet, with only the sound of soft whimpers coming from inside. Curious, he pushed the door open and stepped inside. To his surprise, he found a tiny alien creature huddled in the corner. The creature had big, round eyes that shimmered like stars and a soft, "Hey there," the child said softly, crouching down to the creature's level. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The creature looked up, its eyes wide with fear. It tilted its head, trying to understand the strange human before it. The child slowly extended his hand, hoping to show that he meant no harm. "Please don't be afraid," he continued. "I'm lost too. My name is Max." The creature blinked a few times, then slowly moved closer to Max. It sniffed the air cautiously, as if trying to sense whether he was a friend or foe. After a moment, it took a step forward and touched Max's hand with its tiny paw. "I'll call you Gree," Max said with a smile. "You're my friend now." Gree's eyes sparkled with curiosity. It seemed to understand that Max wanted to help. The child felt a rush of happiness. For the first time since his abduction, he felt less alone. Max and Gree spent the next few hours getting to know each other. Max learned that Gree had also been captured by the aliens. It had been taken from its home planet and was just as frightened as he was. They shared their fears and dreams, realizing they had much in common despite being from different worlds. "Maybe we can escape together," Max suggested, his eyes shining with hope. "You know this ship better than I do, right?" Gree nodded, its eyes lighting up at the idea. It pointed to the ceiling and made a series of soft sounds. Max guessed that Gree was trying to tell him about a way out. He listened carefully, picking up on the creature's gestures. With Gree by his side, Max felt stronger. They began to explore the ship together, sneaking from room to room. Gree was small enough to slip through tight spaces, and it would scout ahead, making sure the coast was clear. Max followed closely, feeling a sense of excitement he hadn't felt in days. They soon discovered a storage area filled with strange items. Gree found a shiny object that looked like a small, colorful ball. It rolled toward Max, and he picked it up, admiring its bright colors. "This is cool," he exclaimed. "We can use it to distract the aliens." Gree chirped happily, clearly pleased with the plan. They practiced tossing the ball back and forth, laughing as it rolled around the room. Max felt a bond growing between them, and it filled him with joy. But their playtime was interrupted by loud footsteps approaching. Panic washed over Max. "Quick, hide!" he whispered. Gree darted behind a stack of crates, and Max squeezed in next to it. They held their breath, listening as the aliens entered the room. Max's heart raced as he watched the aliens search for something. He could see their long, spindly fingers poking around, but they didn't notice Max and Gree hiding. After what felt like an eternity, the aliens left, and the two friends let out a sigh of relief. "That was close," Max whispered, his voice shaking slightly. Gree snuggled closer to him, its soft fur providing comfort. From that moment on, Max knew they were in this together. They would escape the ship and find a way back to their homes. With Gree as his friend, he felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, they would learn more about the alien ship, explore its secrets, and plan their daring escape. Max felt a new sense of hope as they set out on their adventure, knowing that with Gree by his side, anything was possible. With Gree by his side, Max felt more confident than ever. They spent days exploring the alien ship, learning its secrets. Gree was quick and clever, darting through small spaces while Max followed closely behind. Together, they began to understand how the ship worked. One afternoon, while hiding behind a stack of crates in a storage room, Max had an idea. "We need a plan to escape," he whispered to Gree. "If we want to get out of here, we have to know the ship inside and out." Gree's eyes sparkled with excitement. It nodded eagerly, ready to help. The two friends started by making a map. Using an old piece of metal they found, Max began to sketch out the layout of the ship. He drew the rooms they had explored and marked the places where they had seen aliens. Gree watched closely, pointing out areas Max had missed. "This looks good," Max said, feeling proud. They now had a rough map of the ship. He pointed to a room labeled Control Center. "I bet this is where the aliens command the ship. If we can get in there, we might find a way to steer it back to Earth." Gree made a series of soft chirps, clearly excited by the idea. It pointed to a small vent on the side of the map. "You think we can crawl through there?" Max asked, looking at Gree. The little creature nodded confidently. Max traced a line from the storage room to the vent, marking their escape route. "If we can reach the vent, we can sneak into the control center," he said, his voice filled with determination. "But we have to be very careful. We can't let the aliens see us." Over the next few days, they practiced their plan. They watched the aliens' routines closely, noting when they were busy and when they were away. Max discovered that the aliens often gathered in a large room to eat their meals, leaving the ship quiet and empty. That would be the perfect time for their escape. Finally, the day came. Max and Gree woke early, feeling a mix of excitement and fear. "Today is the day," Max said, trying to sound brave. Gree chirped in agreement, its small body buzzing with energy. As the aliens prepared for their meal, Max and Gree slipped out of their hiding spot. They moved quietly, sticking to the shadows. Max held the map tightly, his heart pounding as they approached the vent. He glanced at Gree, who was already climbing up the side of the wall with ease. "Let's go!" Max whispered, scrambling after his friend. He reached the vent and squeezed through, feeling the cool metal against his skin. Gree waited for him on the other side, its eyes glowing with encouragement. Once inside the vent, they crawled slowly, careful to make as little noise as possible. Max was surprised at how dark it was. He could only see a little light ahead. "We're almost there," he whispered, feeling a sense of purpose. As they crawled, Max thought about his family back on Earth. He missed them so much. He thought of his mom's warm hugs and his dad's laughter. He wanted to see them again, and that thought gave him strength. He knew he had to make it back. After what felt like a long time, they reached a vent that opened into the control center. Max peered through the grate and saw the room filled with strange machines and screens. The aliens were busy working, their attention focused on the glowing buttons in front of them. "Now what?" Max whispered, feeling nervous. Gree looked up at him, its eyes wide with determination. It pointed at a control panel close to the door. "If we can reach that panel, we might be able to make the ship move," Max said, feeling a rush of hope. "But we have to be quick." Taking a deep breath, Max and Gree pushed open the vent cover just enough to slip out. They landed softly on the floor and quickly hid behind a large machine. Max could feel his heart racing. He glanced at Gree, who nodded, ready to go. "On the count of 3, Max whispered. 1, 2, 3. They dashed across the room, weaving between machines. Max felt adrenaline pumping through his veins as they reached the control panel. Gree stood watch while Max studied the buttons, remembering how the aliens pressed them. "Here goes nothing," Max said, pressing a big green button in the center. Suddenly the ship shuddered, and lights began to flash. The aliens looked up, alarmed. "Gree, we need to move!" Max shouted, panic rising. They had to act fast if they wanted to escape. Max's heart raced as he pressed the button on the control panel. The ship shuddered and the lights flickered wildly. He knew they had triggered something important, but the sudden noise and chaos made him panic. "Gree, we need to hide!" Max whispered urgently. They ducked behind the large machine as the aliens turned their attention to the panel. The creatures had long, slender bodies, and their eyes were wide with confusion. Max could see fear in their movements as they tried to understand what was happening. "Why did you press that button?" One alien shouted in its strange language, pointing a long, thin finger toward the panel. The other aliens murmured among themselves, their voices rising in alarm. Max felt a chill run down his spine. He had expected the aliens to be confused, but now they looked angry. "What do we do now?" he asked Gree, his voice shaking. Gree's small body pressed closer to Max, its eyes wide and worried. Suddenly, the panel emitted a loud beep, drawing the aliens' attention even more. "It's coming from there!" Another alien shouted, pointing directly at Max and Gree's hiding spot. "They were found! Run!" Max yelled, grabbing Gree's tiny paw. They dashed out from behind the machine, heart pounding in their chests. Max could hear the aliens shouting behind them as they raced through the control center. The ship shook as alarms blared and flashing lights illuminated their path. They sprinted toward the door, desperately trying to reach the hallway. Just as they approached, an alien stepped in front of them. It was taller and had a menacing look, its eyes glaring down at the two friends. "Stop! You cannot escape!" it commanded in a booming voice. Max skidded to a halt, nearly crashing into Gree. The alien's presence was intimidating, and for a moment fear paralyzed him. "Gree, what do we do?" Max whispered, barely able to breathe. The little alien looked up at him with determination, its small frame shaking with energy. It seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. Before Max could think, Gree stepped forward. It chirped loudly, making strange sounds that echoed in the control center. The alien frowned, confused by Gree's actions. "What is this creature saying?" it demanded, glancing back at the others. Taking advantage of the distraction, Max glanced around for an escape route. He spotted an open doorway behind the alien. "This way!" he shouted, pulling Gree along. They darted past the alien, narrowly escaping its grasp. Max and Gree ran down the dimly lit corridor, their feet pounding against the metal floor. They could hear the aliens yelling behind them, but they didn't dare look back. They pushed forward, fueled by adrenaline. "Where do we go now?" Max asked, panting heavily. Gree pointed ahead, its big eyes shining with determination. They reached a junction with two paths, one to the left and one to the right. "Which way?" Max asked, panic creeping into his voice. Gree hesitated for a moment, then tugged on Max's sleeve and pointed right. Trusting his friend, Max nodded. "Okay, let's go." They took off down the right path, zigzagging through the narrow corridors. The sounds of the aliens faded behind them, and for a moment it felt like they might escape. But then they turned a corner and found themselves face to face with another group of aliens. "Stop right there!" one of the aliens shouted, raising its arm. Max's heart sank. They were surrounded! In that moment of panic, Max spotted an open door to the left. "Gree, that way!" he yelled, taking off again. They rushed into the room, slamming the door behind them. Inside, the room was filled with strange objects and machines. Max quickly scanned the area. "We need to find something to block the door," he shouted. Gree darted across the room, picking up a heavy object and pushing it against the door. As the aliens pounded on the door from the other side, Max felt the walls shake. "Hurry, Gree," he urged. They could hear the aliens' angry voices growing louder. Max's eyes fell on a control panel in the corner of the room. "Maybe I can make this work," he said, rushing over. He began pressing buttons, hoping to find something that could help them escape. Gree worked beside him, looking up at Max with trust and encouragement. Together, they focused on the panel, trying to find a way to outsmart the aliens and escape the ship. The aliens continued to pound on the door, and Max knew they didn't have much time. Just then, a bright light filled the room as the control panel whirred to life. Max's heart raced with hope. "I think I found something," he exclaimed, feeling a surge of excitement. They might have a chance after all. Max's fingers danced over the control panel, desperately searching for a way to escape. The pounding on the door grew louder, sending waves of fear through his body. Gree stood beside him, its tiny form quivering with anticipation. Together, they needed a plan. Come on, Max muttered, pressing buttons in a hurry. Suddenly, the panel lit up with bright symbols and lights. A map of the ship appeared on the screen. "Look, Gree! It's a map!" Max exclaimed, pointing at the glowing image. Gree chirped excitedly, jumping up and down. "We might be able to find a way out," Max said, feeling a surge of hope. He studied the map closely. "There's a way to the hangar from here. If we can get there, maybe we can find a ship to escape." "Let's do it," Gree encouraged, its eyes wide with determination. Max knew they had to act fast. The aliens would break through the door at any moment. "Okay, we have to move," Max declared. He quickly pressed a few buttons, shutting off the alarm. The room fell silent, and the pounding on the door stopped for a brief moment. "This way," he urged, leading Gree toward a door on the far side of the room. As they stepped through the door, Max felt a rush of adrenaline. They dashed down a narrow hallway, their feet echoing against the metal floor. The ship felt alive, vibrating beneath them as they ran. Max glanced back, half expecting the aliens to follow, but there was only silence. "We're doing it," Max said, feeling a wave of excitement wash over him. But they couldn't slow down. They had to keep moving. They turned corner after corner, following the map on the control panel. The ship was huge, and it felt like they were running for ages. Finally, they reached another door labeled hangar. Max's heart raced with hope. "This is it," he shouted, pulling the door open. Inside, they found a large room filled with various alien ships. Some were sleek and shiny, while others looked bulky and worn. Max couldn't believe their luck. They might actually find a way home. "Which one should we take?" Gree asked, scanning the room. Max looked around, trying to find a ship that looked easy to operate. "That one," he said, pointing to a small ship in the corner. It had a smooth surface and looked like it could be piloted by just a few buttons. "Let's get inside!" They hurried over to the ship, jumping into the cockpit. Max was amazed at how different everything looked. The controls were bright and colorful, with many buttons, levers, and screens. "Do you think we can fly this?" Gree asked, glancing nervously at the complex panel. Max took a deep breath. "We have to try. I'll figure it out," he said, determination shining in his eyes. He remembered the way the aliens had pressed buttons on the control panel. With a surge of confidence, he reached for the main controls. "Okay, here goes nothing," he declared, pushing one of the buttons. The ship shuddered to life and the lights flickered on. Max's heart soared with excitement. "It worked! We can do this!" Gree chirped happily, but the sound of footsteps echoed from the hallway outside. "Max! They're coming!" It squeaked, fear creeping into its voice. "Quick! We need to take off!" Max said, frantically looking for the controls to start the engines. He pressed another button and the ship began to hum. The engines roared to life, shaking the small craft. "Hang on!" Max shouted, gripping the controls tightly. He felt the ship lift slightly off the ground. "We're almost ready!" Just then, the door to the hangar burst open and the aliens stormed in. They were furious, shouting in their strange language. Max's heart raced. He had to get them out of there. Come on, he urged, slamming his hand down on another button. The ship surged forward, the engines roaring as it shot out of the hangar. The aliens watched in shock as Max and Gree zoomed away from the ship. "We did it! We're escaping!" Max cheered, his eyes shining with excitement. He piloted the ship away from the alien vessel, feeling the rush of freedom. Gree squeaked with joy, bouncing in its seat. "Now we just need to find Earth," it said, its excitement contagious. As they flew through space, Max felt a sense of hope wash over him. They had faced the aliens and escaped. Together they could do anything. "Let's find our way home, Gree," Max shouted, determination flooding through him. He adjusted the ship's controls, setting a course for Earth. This was just the beginning of their adventure together.